Okay, hi class. So now we'll be discussing the part of the Odyssey that most people think of when they think of the Odyssey. This is about the journey that Odysseus actually goes on. More specifically, it's his narration of the journey, which constitutes books 9 through 13. I put the map up here just to remind you how far he gets blown off course when trying to get home to Ithaca, which is over here. Okay, so here are my goals. So first I want to remind us of the occasion for his tales, because it's easy to forget why he's even telling the story. Then we're going to consider the episodes in the story of his journey through the lessons they impart about what it means to be a Greek man. So there's a lot of different journeys, different stories. They're kind of hard to characterize all together, and so this is sort of my suggestion for characterizing them. So I spoke about this before, but Odysseus seems to need to learn this kind of common lesson for ancient Western stories, that a man is less than divine, but maybe more than an animal, or more than like a base level of a human, like maybe like lower classes or something like that. A Greek man specifically needs to remember and honor the past, but also anticipate the future. So a lot of his stories kind of situate Odysseus in time. We might have a little bit of a discussion here. I might throw it out to you. Do you think Odysseus is actually a good leader? And then maybe a related question, or maybe it's not related. Is he a good person? I think it's kind of debatable. And then I'll introduce this concept of recognition and recognition scenes. This will be a feature in our next lectures. So anyway, I want to introduce it today. Okay, so here's the occasion of the stories of Odysseus' journey. So I'll remind you at the end of book 8, this is Odysseus is in the kingdom of the Phaeacians. They've been making him feel very welcome there. This is the place he landed on the island naked after a shipwreck. Princess Nausicaa helps him out. King Alcinous seems to want him as a son-in-law. Towards the end of book 8, there's a poet who comes in and starts singing a story of the Trojan War and of Odysseus' exploits in it, and Odysseus starts crying. And no one present knows who this man is. He's still a stranger. Because of their customs of hospitality, they haven't yet asked him to identify himself. And so at the end of book 8, here Alcinous turns to the stranger and asks him, tell us who you are. Okay. But come now, tell me about your wanderings. Describe the places, the people, the cities you have seen. Which ones were wild and cruel, unwelcoming, which were kind to visitors, respecting the gods. And please explain why you were crying, sobbing your heart out when you heard him sing what happened to the Greeks at Troy. The gods devised and measured out this devastation to make a song for those in times to come. Did you lose somebody at Troy? A man from your wife's family, perhaps? Her father or brother? Ties of a marriage are the closest after bonds of blood. Or perhaps you lost the friend you knew who knew you best of all. A friend can be as close as any brother. So here's King Alcinous sort of extrapolating, like, why would this man be crying? Did he lose someone at Troy? But, Odysseus himself was at Troy, so, this reveals that they don't really know who this man is. Anyway, that's the end of book 8. Beginning of book 9, Odysseus begins his journey, or the tale of his journey. Wily Odysseus, the Lord of Lies, answered. He first says stuff about poets. I excerpted that out. And he says, first I will tell my name, so we will be acquainted, and if I survive, you can be my guest in my distant home one day. I am Odysseus, Laertes' son, known for my many clever tricks and lies. I wanted to include these lines here, just because note how often Homer mentions lying. Wily Odysseus, Lord of Lies. He even says that of himself. I am Laertes' son, known for many clever tricks and lies. Of course, Odysseus is famous for his most clever trick, the Trojan horse, but he's also famous for lying. So even as he begins the story of his journey in book 9, he's reminding us, both he, Odysseus, and Homer, they're both reminding us how untrustworthy Odysseus might be. So you might take some of these tales with a grain of salt as you listen to them. Okay, let's get started. So here's my sort of schematic again for kind of thinking about these tales. So, Odysseus is sometimes in a position where he has the temptation to become more than a man, the temptation to become divine, or more than a good man might be. This might be like the temptation to be, to think too highly of himself, to have too big of an ego. He also, and some of his men especially, have the dangers of becoming less than human, less than men. Let's talk more about that. A lot of the troubles come from not remembering the past, not learning from the past. Also, maybe not anticipating the future. These things are very related. So this is just how I've organized it, but you might organize it in a different way. Excuse me. So here's just a kind of overview of the stops on his journey, like the particular tales. As we go through some of these, some of them we'll spend more time on than others. You might ask yourself, what are the lessons of this tale? Like, what is Odysseus meant to learn in the story? Or what are we as readers meant to learn by witnessing Odysseus on this journey? Okay, sacking the Cicones, Lotus Eaters, Cyclops, Floating Island of Aeolus, Steward of the Winds. These are, usually people love these stories. They're often the most exciting part of the Odyssey that people remember. But many of them are quite short. This is 26 lines, Anyway, we'll review a lot of these. Okay, so first up, sacking the Cicones. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that, by the way. But this is kind of the first moment where things start to go kind of awry for Odysseus. Okay, here is him narrating this story. Now let me tell you all the trouble Zeus has caused me on my journey home from Troy. So already this kind of tells you something. It's not like he brought the trouble on himself. No. Zeus caused me, Odysseus, trouble. A blast of wind pushed me off course, towards the Cicones in Ismarus. I sacked the town and killed the men. We took their wives and shared their riches equally among us. Then I said we must run away. Those fools refused to listen. They were drinking wine excessively and killing sheep and cattle along the beach. The Cicones called out to neighbors on the mainland who were strong and numerous and skilled at horseback fighting, and if need be on foot. They came like leaves and blossoms in the spring at dawn. Then Zeus gave us bad luck. Poor us. This is really interesting. This might be a good... there's a bunch of good things to write about for assignment too, but these are really telling lines. This is the first stop of Odysseus and his men home from Troy. This conflict that took 10 years, they start acting like they're still at war. Like they sack the town, kill the men, took their wives, and share their riches. This is exactly the sort of Greek model of warfare. But note, things don't go very well for them. Neighbors come out to help the Cicones, and then start to slaughter Odysseus' men. They came like leaves and blossoms in the spring at dawn. Like, what an interesting simile here, that these warriors defending their neighbors are coming like leaves and blossoms like springtime. Very interesting. Okay, so anyway, you might have thoughts about this as to why this might be an important moment in the Odyssey and what Odysseus might learn from this. Okay, so anyway, that's the first one. Let's see here. And I also include how many people died in each of these episodes. So 6 well-armed members of my crew died from each ship. So I think Odysseus has like 12 ships. And so here, 6 from each ship died. So 6 times 12. A lot. I think it's 48? 62? I don't know. Anyway, whatever. Okay, so the second one, the Lotus Eaters. This one will be kind of familiar to you. It's another episode having to do with drug use. Also, you'll note that I'm including a lot of like really beautiful pieces of art. A lot of these stories have inspired artists to depict them visually because they're so evocative. So anyway, the Lotus Eaters. If you've seen what do you call it? The Wizard of Oz. There's that scene where they become drugged by the poppies. Very similar to this scene in the Odyssey as well. Okay, so Odysseus sends out scouts to explore. So they end up on this other island or something like that. Odysseus seems like he's learned something. He sends out scouts to explore the land before he himself goes there. The scouts encountered humans, lotus eaters, who did not hurt them. They just shared with them their sweet, delicious fruit. But as they ate it, they lost the will to come back and bring news to me. They wanted only to stay there, feeding on lotus with the lotus eaters. They had forgotten home. I dragged them back in tears, forced them on board the hollow ships, pushed them below the decks, and tied them up. I told the other men, the loyal ones, to get back in the ships so no one else would taste the lotus and forget about our destination. So this is another really interesting moment, right? Oh, by the way, it's likely not lotus exactly that these people are eating. This seems to be some sort of narcotic. Like, I don't think lotus is addictive in any way, but whatever this plant is that these guys are eating, it makes people sleepy, and sleepy in a particular way. They lose the will to come back and do the duty that they are obligated to do. So they were supposed to bring news back, but they lost the will to do that. They only wanted to stay there. And moreover, they forget home. You know, the duty that you might feel to go home, that no longer matters. And so notice that this episode gets tied up with the virtue of loyalty, loyalty and sort of duty to home. Pretty interesting. Now, it's easy to condemn these men for doing this, you know, for eating narcotics or whatever, and then forgetting about home. But think about how you would feel if you were actually Odysseus's men. You have been fighting in a conflict for 10 years. Warfare is really, really tough on humans. It's traumatic. It's not great. Of course, you would want to forget about some of that stuff. You know, and forget about some of the pain that you're carrying with you. Maybe a consequence of trying to forget your pain might also be trying to forget your duty as well. You forget about home. Anyway, interesting. Okay, we'll keep going. Okay, the Cyclops. This tends to be people's kind of favorite. I'll spend a little bit more time here about the Cyclops episode. So this is in book 9. Okay, so here is how Odysseus describes the land of the Cyclops. Some people pronounce this Cyclopes or something. Anyway, I'll just say Cyclops because that is typically how people generally refer to this creature. A Cyclops is it's like a giant humanoid figure who has one big eyeball instead of two. Okay, so all right, around that cave, so they see this cave on an island and they're like, what's going on? So around the cave was built a lofty courtyard of deep-set stone, with tall pines rising up and leafy oaks. There lived a massive man who shepherded his flocks all by himself. He did not go to visit other people, but kept apart, and did not know the ways of custom. In his build he was a wonder, a giant, not like men who live on bread, but like a wooded peak in airy mountains, rising above the rest. So this isn't, I mean, there's plenty of other lines I could have pulled from this episode that really is illustrative of the difference between the Cyclops and Odysseus as a regular human or as a Greek. But this one I like. So he's massive. Not only does his size differentiate him, he's massive and he's a wonder, a giant. Oops. But rather, I found it really interesting that part of what makes him different is that he works alone. He shepherded his flocks all by himself. He did not go to visit other people. He's a bit of a loner. You know, this is very different from Odysseus and the Greeks. They tend to, you know, work in teams. When Odysseus is alone, he's really in danger. But the Cyclops lives alone by preference. So he's not like men who live on bread. He's instead of like a man who lives on consumable. This guy seems, another simile, like a wooded peak in airy mountains. It's as if the Cyclops is like a piece of nature himself. It's interesting. And then I also like this line, he did not know the ways of custom. This is really interesting. Because I think by this Homer means, or maybe Odysseus means, because remember Odysseus is narrating this. Odysseus means the Cyclops did not know the ways of our customs. The Cyclops is not Greek. The Cyclops will find he has customs of his own. You know, customs are like ways of doing things. The Cyclops certainly has those. but they're not Greek customs. So this is a bit of a culture clash, this episode. Okay, let's read more about it. So anyway, I just picked one line to kind of illustrate the plot of this episode. My friends, no man is killing me by tricks, not force. Just to remind you what's going on here. So Odysseus and some men sneak into the Cyclops cave, and they get trapped in there. The Cyclops realizes that, people are in there and like, eating his cheese, killing his sheep. So the Cyclops traps them in there, and then begins, in sort of retaliation, the Cyclops begins to eat Odysseus's men. Which Odysseus does not like, obviously. Like, his men are being cannibalized, But, if you look at it from the Cyclops' perspective, there's this man who has, like, broken into his house and stolen his goods. This is not a good, situation from the Cyclops' point of view. From Odysseus' point of view, he might assume that the Cyclops is like a fellow Greek, and so he might assume that the Cyclops would welcome him as a guest and give him, food. This is sort of customs of Xenia. You welcome guests in, you feed them, you clothe them, you bathe them, you listen to their stories, and then you help each other. That's what Greeks do. The Cyclops doesn't seem to be Greek. He does not obey the customs that Odysseus is used to. So anyway, this is a huge clash of cultures. What ends up happening is the Cyclops is really interested in alcohol. Odysseus gets the guy drunk. You can see the sort of vessel here. The Cyclops gets drunk. Odysseus and his men team up together to blind the Cyclops by stabbing his one eye with this spear. And then they like hide underneath the woolly sheep of the Cyclops so that the blinded Cyclops can't tell that they've left the cave. Also, Odysseus has told the Cyclops that his name is No Man, which is like clever, I guess, clever trick. And so when the Cyclops does ask his fellow Cyclops people for help, he's like, no man is killing me. So it sounds like there's no one killing him. They're like, why are you yelling then? So anyway, it's all very hilarious, but also sort of tragic for the Cyclops. So here's another just image of the Cyclops. The Cyclops is an important character because he is, not only does he represent all this culture clash stuff, but he's also the son of Poseidon. Poseidon is the sea god. He's the chief god who is angry at Odysseus, specifically because Odysseus blinds Polyphemus, which is the name of the Cyclops that he blinds. Okay, so here Odysseus has gotten away. His clever trick has worked. He's told the guy his name is No Man. However, he's so prideful, he's so proud, Odysseus, that he can't not take credit for what he's done. So when Odysseus is safely away, it seems, he yells back at the Cyclops these lines here. Cyclops, if any mortal asks you how your eye was mutilated and made blind, say that Odysseus, the city sacker, Laertes' son, who lives in Ithaca, destroyed your sight. So think about how dumb this is for Odysseus to do. He basically tells Cyclops exactly who he is and where he lives. My goodness. And he seems to do this because he is proud. He's proud of his clever trick, and he wants credit for it. This is sort of the thing that seals Odysseus' fate. Polyphemus knows exactly who has blinded him now. He's no longer tricked, and so Polyphemus and his father Poseidon can kind of team up to get retribution for this act of being blinded. Anyway, this is kind of like a little tip, or sort of like, not a tip, but kind of trivia. Many people think that the Cyclops is based on looking at the skulls of elephants. Because if you've ever seen an elephant skull, there's a really big circle in the middle of it where their trunk comes from, and everything. Their eyes are on the sides of their heads, but there's like a big hole in the middle. So if you were like an ancient person, I suppose, and you saw the skull of an elephant, you might be like, wow, this is a giant, a giant Cyclops, potentially. So anyway, I just kind of like that. Okay, let's keep going. So anyway, you might have something to say about this episode, maybe in your writing, whatever. Okay, the next one I want to talk about, Aeolus, the steward of the winds. This story is an interesting one as well. Aeolus is an interesting character. He seems to be like a king of some sort. Anyway, after Poseidon has been has become angry at Odysseus, he brings up a bunch of like storms at sea, and Odysseus and his men end up on the lands of Aeolus, this wind steward, who does agree to help him. So, okay, here's Odysseus speaking. So he agreed to help me. He gave me a bag of oxhide leather, and he tied the gusty winds inside it. Zeus, the son of Cronos, made him steward of the winds, and he can stop or rouse them as he wishes. Sorry, this is a typo. So this is a really great gift. Right, so we're back into the customs of Xenia, where like a host gives a good gift to a guest. Aeolus, the steward of the winds, he controls the trade winds, the winds at sea. And so the gift is this bag of winds. Great gift, right? Unfortunately, however, Odysseus has a problem with his men. The men get jealous of this bag. They're like, what's in the bag? I want to see it. They unleash the bag, unleash all the winds. They get blown completely off course. They're almost home, in fact, and then they end up back at the land of Aeolus. Aeolus here is speaking, why are you here again? You had bad luck. What happened? Surely we helped you go on your way and meant for you to reach your homeland where you wish to go. So Aeolus is actually really mad that Odysseus is back. It seems like he's squandered the gift Aeolus gave him. So of course he's not going to help him again. He's like, you seem to be cursed, dude. I'm not going to help you. So this is kind of a story of like a squandered gift, in a sense. It's also a story of like maybe Odysseus has a problem with his subordinates. He's not maybe a very good leader, because he can't really keep them in line, or he can't explain to them reasons to follow him. The Laestrygonians, this is another, I won't go into too much detail here. The Laestrygonians is another story of giants who attack Odysseus's men. They end up like killing people for various reasons. Anyway, Circe's island. This is an interesting moment. Circe is a goddess like Calypso, a goddess who wants Odysseus to be her boyfriend. This is also a story of drugs as well. So here's Odysseus describing what's going on Circe's island. She added potent drugs to make them, Odysseus's men, totally forget their home. They took and drank the mixture. Then she struck them using her magic wand and penned them in the pigsty. They returned to pigs in body and voice and hair. Their minds remained the same. So this is rather interesting. I have an image here of Circe that's more contemporary, sort of like the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. So this is kind of a depiction of Circe. Beautiful goddess figure who makes men, she changes men, she transforms men in a sense. So by giving them drugs. So she gives them drugs, they forget their home. This is similar to the Lotus Eaters, of course. But it seems like her particular brand of magic is particularly feminized. She struck them using her magic wand, pinned them in a pigsty. They returned to pigs in body, voice, and hair. Their minds remained the same. There is kind of a way in which this episode gets read as drugs or alcohol can turn men into animals. You know, your minds kind of remain the same, but in this sense, so in the story, their minds remain the same. Their bodies turn into pigs. We can maybe invert that and think about like what that might mean allegorically, like what is sort of like the metaphor of this being transformed into a pig. It might be more like when you drink alcohol, your kind of baser instincts, your more kind of like id-driven instincts come out. You might want to eat more, drink more, muck about more. You might want to have sex more. You might want to act more like an animal. And so that is kind of one way of viewing Circe, is she's sort of this figure of temptation who tempts you into being less than human, um, more sexual, more gluttonous, you know, more greedy, like a pig. So anyway, I wanted to show you this image of Circe. There's another way of viewing Circe too, which more emphasizes her, not so much her sexuality and her temptation factor, but more her magic. She is a magician. So here's a way of looking at Circe too. Here, this Circe is like, so she's conjuring the winds, and they look like human figures here. And she also has some sort of like power over all these animals on her island as well. So that could be a way of you looking at Circe. Maybe she's not so much like sexual and feminized in that way, but maybe she's powerful because she's like a wizard. She's able to transform beings. Interesting. I just like this, so I wanted to tell you that there's like a tradition. Anyway, there's a tradition later on in the history of the West where alcohol and drugs are linked to particular animals. So like the argument in these sorts of like in this image and also in writings similar to this, they say like when you get drunk you turn into a particular animal. So like some people are like lions, when they get drunk they like roar a lot and they're loud and kind of like dominant. Some people, when they get drunk, they turn into puppies. They get like very happy and like jumpy and stuff like that. Maybe they like try to hump things or whatever. Sometimes humans turn into pigs. Sometimes, and sometimes they turn into like, they cry too much, or maybe they get too sleepy. So anyway, alcohol and drugs might reveal the sort of animal side of you that is lurking within you. Anyway, so here's an image of Circe too, kind of doing that to these humans, turning them into the particular animals that they have inside them, that they have a tendency towards a particular vice. Okay, so I'll end there. Circe is another of those figures who wants Odysseus as her like boyfriend forever. She offers him immortality, and he turns it down. We might talk more about that later. But one thing that Circe does also help Odysseus with is she tells him how to navigate the underworld. There's a portion of his journey where Odysseus needs to go and encounter the dead in the underworld. And so here are some of the people that he meets. This episode is really exciting because we get to be reintroduced to characters who have died in the war and elsewhere. So here's some people that he meets. Elpenor. Elpenor is someone who died on Circe's island. He like falls out of a tree and breaks his neck or something like that. So Odysseus is reunited with Elpenor, and Elpenor asks Odysseus to return and bury his body. So this might remind you of the parts in the Iliad where burial is so important. You can't just leave a body unattended. It's disrespectful. Odysseus meets his mother in the underworld. This is a very moving moment. If you like thinking about moms, and especially sons and mothers, this might be a good thing to write about. This is how Odysseus learns his mother has died. Remember, he hasn't been home since the Trojan War began, so he likely hadn't heard that his mother had passed away until he meets her here. On seeing her, I wept in pity. His mother speaks to him and gives him a message. It's really sweet, a sweet moment. You can read more about it. He meets this prophet Tiresias. We'll talk more about him in just a second. He meets Agamemnon, who we'll also talk about in a second. This is really important. So his old kind of like friend and commander in the Trojan War, Agamemnon. He meets Achilles. Wow, great moments. So if you want to kind of visit some of the themes of the Iliad in this new epic, this is really interesting. Achilles tells Odysseus that he regrets what he did at Troy. He says, "I would prefer to be a workman hired by a poor man on a peasant farm than rule as king of all the dead." This is kind of similar to Menelaus' lines earlier, who says that he regrets having gone to war. Seems like Achilles regrets it too. So you might ask yourself, like, do you really buy this? Do you think that Achilles really regrets choosing glory, or maybe you always regret the choice you didn't make, or something like that. He meets Ajax, another warrior who dies after Troy. And then he meets some Titans, which is interesting. So there's in the underworld, it's not only humans who live there after death, it's the Titans who are buried. We read about that in Hesiod's Theogony, to remind you. He also meets Hercules, which is interesting, so if you know anything about the Hercules myth, you might look into that. Okay, Tiresias. Tiresias is a prophet figure. He comes up a lot in different myths. We'll read about him in Oedipus Rex in the future. But so I'll introduce him now. Tiresias is really an important figure. He's famous in myth because he sees both sides of things. So he's kind of like a mortal guy who lives in the underworld. So he's a bit immortal as well. He's also lived as both a man and a woman. He got in a fight with Hera. Hera says that women have it worse than men because men always cheat, etc. Tiresias says, no, men have it worse than women. Women just nag all the time, whatever. So Hera gets really mad at Tiresias, turns him into a woman. So he begins to understand what it's like to be a woman. And then she comes back to him and she says, it's worse to be a woman, right? You get it now. And then he goes, actually, no, it's still worse to be a man. And so Hera gets really angry, and I think she curses him. Anyway, so Tiresias in myth is this sort of figure who's seen both sides, whatever. Okay, but Tiresias, this prophet figure who can see the future, the past, he can see both sides of situations. He tells Odysseus what he needs to know. He gives him this warning. Odysseus, you think of going home as honey sweet, but gods will make it bitter. I think Poseidon will not cease to feel incensed because you blinded his dear son. You have to suffer, but you can get home if you control your urges and your men. Turn from the purple depths and sail your ship towards the island of Thrinacia. There you will find grazing cows and fine fat sheep belonging to the god who sees and hears all things, the sun god. If you leave them be, keeping your mind fixed on your journey home, you may still get to Ithaca despite great losses. But if you hurt those cows, I see disaster for your ship and for your men. If you yourself escape, you will come home late and exhausted in a stranger's boat, having destroyed your men. So this is the prophecy Odysseus gets kind of early in his journey. This prophecy definitely comes true. Odysseus is not able to control his urges. He's not able to control his men. The men eat the cattle of the sun god, and all of the men die. Odysseus is able to escape, but he comes home late and exhausted and in a stranger's boat. And then with the burden of having destroyed all of his men. Like Odysseus really suffers a lot. You know, it's basically his fault that all of his men die is what Tiresias is saying here. So anyway, but here's the sort of like urging that Tiresias gives him. If you are able to control your urges and your men, you know, learn to do that, Odysseus. That's kind of his injunction. We see that Odysseus is not really able to do this, but this should be what he does. This is what he should do, is the sort of moral he should be learning through these tales, I think. Anyway, let's keep going. So yeah, we'll meet Tiresias again in Oedipus the King. Okay, let's talk Agamemnon. Odysseus meets Agamemnon in the underworld. So this would be the way that Odysseus learns Agamemnon died as well. Agamemnon narrates his death. Remember, Agamemnon was killed by his wife and her lover, who happens also to be Agamemnon's cousin, Aegisthus. They kill him when Agamemnon comes home from Troy in glory. So his glorious Nostos is cut short by his murder. Okay, so this is how Agamemnon narrates his murder. As I lay dying, struck through by the sword, I tried to lift my arms up from the ground. The she-dog turned away. I went to Hades. She did not even shut my eyes or close my mouth. There's no more disgusting act than when a wife betrays a man like that. That woman formed a plot to murder me, her husband. When I got back home, I thought I would be welcomed, at least by my slaves and children. She has such an evil mind that she poured down shame on her own head and on all other women, even good ones. So this is interesting, to say the least. Agamemnon, through blaming Clytemnestra for murdering him, he extrapolates and blames all women for this act. This kind of might remind you of, like, blaming Eve or blaming Pandora, one woman who messes up, and then it becomes kind of like a symbol for all women being bad. But notice how exactly bad Clytemnestra is. As I lay dying, struck through by the sword, I tried to lift my arms up from the ground. So Agamemnon being stabbed is trying. I mean, this is such a narrating such an act of, like, vulnerability. Like, he's like, please save me. He's trying to ask for help, and his wife turns away from him. He calls her a she-dog, like a bitch. She turned away. So she turns away from her husband dying. If this rings a bell, As I Lay Dying, it should. There's a Faulkner novel who he takes this line and titles his novel this, As I Lay Dying. So it's kind of like this depiction of total lack of compassion of a wife to her husband. And then here, she did not even shut my eyes or close my mouth. So this man has been murdered. He is screaming and crying. His eyes are wide open. His mouth is wide open in a scream, probably. And she just lets him die like that, without closing his mouth or eyes. So it's this very shameful death from a man who expected to be welcomed as a hero back from Troy. So anyway, we'll read Clytemnestra's version of this event in the play Agamemnon later. But from Agamemnon's perspective, this is a horrible act for a wife to betray her husband like this, as you might imagine it to be. It's pretty bad from his perspective. From her perspective, she has a lot of other things to say, so we don't really get her perspective here. But okay, but notice that this isn't a particular warning to Odysseus. It's a warning to be a little bit wary of women. He tells Odysseus directly, "You must never treat your wife too well. Do not let her know everything you know. Tell her some things, hide others. But your wife will not kill you, Odysseus. The wise Penelope is much too sensible to do such things." Okay, so I'm talking about Penelope maybe a little bit, but giving a warning here, like, you can't really trust your wife, maybe even Penelope. I don't know. I have a final piece of sound advice for you. Take heed of it. When you arrive in your own land, do not anchor your ship in full view. Move in secret. There is no trusting women any longer. So even though Agamemnon suspects that Penelope is sensible and has been true to Odysseus and would not kill him, he does warn Odysseus to be secretive. Don't tell your wife everything you know. Move in secret. Keep things hidden. And this is pretty good advice. This is advice that Odysseus will take as well, because there's no trusting women any longer. Okay, I'll leave that there. Speaking of women, the latter episodes in the journeys that Odysseus narrates have a lot to do with women. There's this episode with the sirens. Circe warns him about this. So it's kind of interesting that a woman warns Odysseus about the temptation of other women. So remember, Circe is kind of a symbol of temptation in some ways. But so she, in helping Odysseus leave her, which is nice of her, similar to Calypso, helps this man who's rejected her leave her. So she gives him advice. She says, "First you will reach the sirens, who bewitch all passers-by. If anyone goes near them in ignorance and listens to their voices, that man will never travel to his home and never make his wife and children happy to have him back with them again. The sirens who sit there in their meadow will seduce him with piercing songs. Around about them lie great heaps of men, flesh rotting from their bones, their skin all shriveled up. Use wax to plug your sailors' ears as you row past so that they are deaf to them. But if you wish to hear them, your men must fasten you to your ship's mast by hand and foot, straight upright with tight ropes. So bound, you can enjoy the siren's song." So Circe gives Odysseus kind of like a good advice here. Like, you will not be able to withstand the temptation of the sirens. Like, no man can, apparently. If you hear their voices, you'll never make it home. However, Odysseus, if you wish to hear them, you get your men to tie you up so that you can hear them but not go to them. the sirens often are symbols of temptation, obviously. They seem really lovely. They have beautiful voices, it seems. They sit in a meadow. They're seductive. So this is the thing that people notice. They notice everything that's good about the sirens, and they don't really see that around about the sirens lie great heaps of men, flesh rotting from their bones, their skin all shriveled up. So sirens are often depicted as like beautiful in the top half, like they're women with wings, and they kind of have like little bird bodies. So it's like you notice the things that you want to see, and you don't really notice the things that you don't really want to see with the sirens. Okay. Yeah, I'll say something here. Sometimes people interpret the sirens as like a symbol of a natural disaster area in the sort of Greek sea. So like there's a part anyway. This might be what's going on with the sirens, that like there's a beautiful part of the ocean that looks like it would be peaceful to travel through, but actually it's very shallow and there's like pointy rocks. So like you assume it's going to be fine, but if you sail over there, your ship might get mired in the wreckage, and that might be what this is describing. That like you get trapped in this. It's basically it'll cause a sea. What do you call it? A shipwreck. But even if that's true, even if it is describing something very natural to sea voyages and stuff like that, it's interesting that it takes the form of seductive women, of course. Okay. So anyway, here's some like other depictions of the sirens. So here they are in their kind of like bird-like female form. There's Odysseus being bound to the mast, and he really, really wants to go to the sirens, but he's plugged his men's ears. This one's interesting. Most of the temptations so far have been like temptations of food and drink. This temptation seems to be particularly oral. So I mean aural, like Aural, like of sound. So that's kind of interesting potentially. Kind of reminds me of Helen using. She's like could mimic the voices of the men's wives in the Trojan horse. So like the temptation of sound can be something that leads you astray too. Here's a mosaic of the scene. These women look more humanoid, but again, you can see the bird feet. Here's a more contemporary one. Waterhouse, famous painter. But so these women here, flying, feasting on these men apparently. And then at some point, I'm not sure exactly how this happened, but the sirens, they went from being mythologically tied to birds to being associated with mermaids. So you might know about this tradition too, the sirens. Usually today, when we say someone's a siren, it's more of like a mermaid thing. But like again, these female figures will cause a shipwreck, and they're beautiful, but they're actually monstrous. Okay, speaking of monstrous women, Circe also warns about Scylla and Charybdis. Okay, in book 12, in book 12, Circe describes Odysseus will have to come to this moment where he has to make a very difficult decision. Is he going to sail his men by Scylla, who is horrible, or by Charybdis, who is also horrible? These are two horrible choices. Which one would be better for him to make? So here's the decision that he has to make between. So there lives Scylla, howling and barking horribly. Her voice is puppy-like, but she is dangerous. Even a god would be afraid of her. She has 12 dangling legs and 6 long necks with a gruesome head on each. And in each face 3 rows of crowded teeth, pregnant with death. Her belly slumps inside the hollow cave. She keeps her heads above the yawning chasm and scopes around the rock and hunts for fish. She catches dolphins, seals, and sometimes even enormous whales. Queen Amphitrite, ruler of roaring waters, nurtures many creatures. No sailors ever pass that way unharmed. She snatches one man with each mouth from off each dark-prowed ship. So, Scylla's horrible. Notice that she's particularly horrible in this kind of female way. So she's feminized. She's female pronouns. She's puppy-like. She's pregnant with death. Sounds kind of interesting. She's got a big belly. So this is kind of like a symbol, I guess, of like, it's kind of like the she dog thing. Like, this kind of like female dog who has given birth or something like that, or maybe she's pregnant. It's kind of, anyway, it's some symbol of like monstrous femininity associated with dogs and pregnancy. Okay, so she's very scary. She also eats humans, so similar to the Cyclops. So if you go by Scylla, the puppy-like Scylla, she'll snatch one man from each ship. So at least one man will die. And she's got 6 heads, so I think each of her 6 heads will snatch one man, so it's like 6 men per ship or something. Okay, the other choice is to go by Charybdis. The other rock, so Charybdis is a big rock. Okay, so the other rock is near enough to shoot an arrow right across, so they're really close to each other. This second rock is lower down, and on it there grows a fig tree with thick leaves. Beneath, divine Charybdis sucks black water down. 3 times a day she spurts it up. I guess Charybdis isn't really a rock, but she's like this whirlpool underneath a rock. Okay, so she sucks black water down 3 times a day. She spurts it up. 3 times she glugs it down. Avoid that place when she is swallowing the water. No one could save you from death then, even great Poseidon. Row fast and steer your ship alongside Scylla, since it is better if you lose 6 men than all of them. So here's the choice he has to make. Run by Scylla and you'll lose 6 men at least, or go by Charybdis and you risk losing everyone. So this would be really tempting, because like sometimes Charybdis doesn't kill you, but sometimes she kills everybody. It's kind of like an all or nothing thing. So like if you were a gambler, you might want to risk going by Charybdis, but that might be an unreasonable risk. In fact, Circe presents it as unreasonable. She's like, go by Scylla. Better to lose 6 than lose everybody. Scylla and Charybdis depicted in art in various ways, but so here's Odysseus and his ship men on a ship here. There's the puppy-like Scylla chomping 6 men. Here's Charybdis, though. She's like this this whirlpool. This is kind of scary. Notice again that Charybdis is feminized. She's swallowing water. People have, Freudians specifically have interpreted this whirlpool as like basically a sort of giant vagina that will like suck you in and castrate you, I guess. Anyway, you don't have to take that as as truth or gospel or anything, but anyway, it is interesting that like these things that can kill him are feminized and monstrous. Okay, the final temptation thing is this thing about the sun god Helios and his cattle. So Helios is Apollo in some ways is also the sun god. Apollo is the god of the sun in terms of like knowledge and enlightenment, like the things that the sun represents, like light, enlightenment, knowledge, poetry, these sorts of like things. Helios is an older god who is literally the sun. So like he's the god who lives as the sun. Basically, it's kind of confusing. I don't really understand exactly why they need 2 different sun gods, but whatever. Helios is the literal sun. Okay, so Circe warns him about the sun god's cattle, just like Tiresias did. So Circe says, if you can remember home and leave the cows unharmed, you will at last arrive in Ithaca, but if you damage them, I must foretell disaster for your ship and for your crew. Even if you survive, you will return late and humiliated, having caused the death of all your men. So again, this is the second time we've heard this warning. Don't eat the cattle of the sun god. But, of course, they do. Of course they do. Like, at the point of book 12, Odysseus' men are very tired. Many of them have died. Many of them no longer trust Odysseus any longer because he kind of keeps lying to them and keeping things from them. He didn't tell them that Scylla would eat 6 of them. Maybe that was strategic, but maybe that was also kind of, a bad move. Anyway, when Odysseus tells them not to eat these cows, they're like, dude, shut up. I'm going to eat the cows. I'm hungry. I don't care. anyway, they don't listen to Odysseus, and then they die because of this, but you can kind of get why his men would not trust him at this point in the journey. Okay, so here is sort of like the numbers of the disastrous journey. So 6 men die in the fighting at Cicones, 6 men die in the Cyclops episode, they get eaten. In the Laestrygonian episode, 11 ships, so Odysseus had 12 ships starting off from Troy, 11 ships are destroyed in the Laestrygonian episode. They get hit by rocks, thrown by giants, and sometimes the giants eat them. Okay, in Circe's island, Elpenor dies, he breaks his neck. Scylla, 6 men die. Helios' cattle, the rest of his men die. So basically everyone dies, except for Odysseus. This is bad odds. And then Odysseus has further, he's really bad luck, he's kind of cursed. He also has a bad effect on the Phaeacians. Remember, the Phaeacians are Princess Nausicaa and her father Alcinous and her mother, who help Odysseus. They listen to his story, and after doing that, they give him a lot of gifts and give him a ship to take back to Ithaca. Poseidon is still angry at Odysseus, however. And when he sees Odysseus going home in the Phaeacian ship, he is very angry at the Phaeacians. So Poseidon went to Phaeacian Scyria, and waited. As the ship sped towards the shore, the god moved near it, turned it all to stone, and slapped his palm to make it rooted to the seabed. So Poseidon punishes the Phaeacians for helping Odysseus. Alcinous interprets this. He says, Poseidon hates us for our habit of helping travelers get home again. Scyria, this Phaeacian Scyria, it's thought to be the island of Corfu. This is a tiny island outside of the place that Phaeacia is based on. It looks a bit like a ship, from afar. And so there's this little story that is told that it's because the Phaeacians helped Odysseus and then Poseidon punished them. And so there it is. There's the symbol of the punishment. It's kind of cute, huh? Okay. All right. I'm kind of wrapping things up. This is the discussion of Book 13. After all of these stories, of all the episodes of his journey, finally Odysseus makes it home to Ithaca. And Homer is very interesting in making Odysseus unresponsive to Ithaca. When he finally arrives home, the thing that he's been waiting to do forever, basically, he doesn't recognize his own home. Why do you think this is? So here, I'll read the lines to you. As I read them aloud, think about this. Why do you think Homer is having Odysseus misrecognize his home? Meanwhile, Odysseus, who had been sleeping in his own native land of Ithaca, woke up, but did not recognize the place from which he had been absent for so long. Pallas Athena cast a mist upon it, so she could tell him how things stood, and make him unrecognizable to his own wife, and family and neighbors, till he paid the suitors back for how they misbehaved. The friendly harbors and the winding paths and leafy trees were all quite unfamiliar to their own king. He leapt up to his feet, and looking at his native land, he groaned and smacked his thighs and sobbed, "Where am I now?" So this is pretty interesting. Poor Odysseus. This makes me feel really sorry for him. He fell asleep because he's exhausted, and of course he would be exhausted because he's gone through so much. If we take him at his word and all of his stories are true, wow, he really, really suffered. And here he is on one final trip. He's like, this is the last trip I'll have to go on. Finally, I'll get home. He's so hopeful. He so expects getting home. But when he wakes up, he doesn't recognize it. He's like, well, where the heck am I now? Jesus, this is super frustrating. In an epic that has been thematizing frustration so much. Here he is, frustrated again. We learn that Athena has done this on purpose. She cast a mist upon Ithaca, so Odysseus doesn't recognize it, but also so Odysseus himself is unrecognizable to his own wife until he can figure out how things stand. So it's kind of interesting. So Ithaca is unrecognizable to Odysseus, and Odysseus is going to be unrecognizable to Ithaca in a way too. So it's kind of changing the way you look at things from both perspectives. So why? Why is Homer doing this? There's various reasons. I'll go through some of them here. Perhaps Homer wants Odysseus to, maybe he's trying to explain how Ithaca has changed. It doesn't look like how Odysseus remembers it. This might imply a lot about the passage of time. 20 years have passed since he's been there. Of course it won't be completely the same. And maybe Odysseus shouldn't expect Ithaca to be the same, because he hasn't been there for 20 years. What other reasons? Maybe this is to thematize how much Odysseus himself has changed. He's unrecognizable to his wife and sons and neighbors and all this stuff. Not only because of 20 years being passed, but yeah, maybe he has changed too. Like his values or habits or something have changed. There's another edition of this work that calls Book 13 Another Strange Island. That might be what's going on here too, that maybe Homer is just sort of like building expectation in the readers and in his character by like withholding the resolution that recognition would give us. The sort of satisfaction we get in recognizing something like home. And so that's kind of why I'm using this to introduce this theme of recognition, which we'll talk much more about next time. Recognition. So first I'm going to define it from Oxford English Dictionary. You probably know this word, but just to kind of bring your attention to some important things about it. So recognition is the action or an act of identifying a person or thing from a previous encounter or knowledge. So this part especially, the mental process of identifying something that has been known before. Also the fact of being known or identified in this way. So I highlighted this one especially. The mental process of identifying something that has been known before. This is actually kind of hard to conceptualize. Recognition is knowing something again. You've known it before, and so in your mind you're identifying the fact that you already know it. Recognition is very interesting because it's like levels of knowledge. You might think of times in your life when you've recognized something. Like when you recognize a person, you're like, this happens to me a lot because sometimes I don't remember what people look like. I have trouble with that. And so like when you finally do recognize someone, you're like, oh my God, we did meet. Yes, you're my friend from 3rd grade or whatever. And that kind of like aha moment in your brain when you make that connection, that synapse connects one part of your memory to like your cognitive function so that you recognize that you do know it. Or maybe it happens to you like on tests where you're like, oh man, I don't know the answer to this, and then you're thinking, and all of a sudden it's like snap, and you recognize it. You're like, oh yes, right. Or maybe that happens to you after you turn the test in, and you're like, damn it, I recognized it, but it's too late. That kind of thing can happen. But yeah, recognition is that kind of very strange form of knowledge that like, it's like one level of knowledge becomes a deeper level of knowledge. So I want to draw attention to the etymology of this word. Re, which means back or again, and cognoscere in Latin, which is the word that means knowledge or like cognition. So it's like knowing again or knowing back. So it's like going back to something you've previously known or like coming to know it again. This is largely what's going to happen to Odysseus and also his family. They're coming to know each other again in a deeper way than they knew each other before. Recognition is really important in like the history of literature, particularly in the West. It starts off, so recognition is a Greek term, but it also existed in Greek. I'm sorry, recognition is a Latin term, pardon me, but it also existed in Greek. This word is hard to pronounce for me, but anagnoresis, it also means recognition. Anagnoresis is a term that we talk about in literary history to refer to the startling discovery in a literary work that produces a change from ignorance to knowledge, or I'm adding this, or a deeper level of knowledge. So Aristotle discusses this in his Poetics in Greek, and he describes it as an important part of literature, of poetry. These recognition scenes where a change from ignorance to knowledge occurs. And so, like the term recognition on the previous slide, we're going from one level of knowing to a deeper level. So here he talks about ignorance, like not knowing to knowing, but we'll see that, like, you know, it takes different forms. You know, maybe in Telemachus's case, he doesn't know his father, but then he comes to know his father. In Penelope's case, she knows her husband on one level, but she comes to know him on this other level in the epic. Anyway, in Aristotle's Poetics, it usually involves a revelation of the true identity of persons previously unknown, as when a father recognizes a stranger as his son, or vice versa. So this is literally what is going to happen in the next few books when father and son come to know each other. Okay, so hopefully that sets you up for the next scenes to come. As you read books 14 through 19, try to track when the various characters we meet recognize Odysseus. Remember, he appears to them like Agamemnon told him, in disguise. He kind of comes to them in secret, and he, manipulates their knowledge of him. So you might look back on book 13 when Odysseus arrives in Ithaca. He has this really interesting moment with Athena that we'll talk more about next time. Remember Telemachus's lines from book 1, no one knows their own begetting. Telemachus will actually come to know his father, the man who begot him in an interesting way. And then recall previous descriptions of Penelope in book 1. So very interesting when various characters come to know and recognize Odysseus. So hope you like reading these books. Okay, I'll stop.